So 21.
Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight, we'll be continuing with the Analects. We're on book 14. We'll be starting with chapter 21. We will have 1 to 2 readings of the text. Then we will go to Aman, who will walk us through Aman and Jason's translation. There'll be some brief comments, and then we will open it up to everyone else. And then after that, we ask that you keep your comments brief, and so that we can get through as many chapters as possible. We'll leave plenty of time afterwards for healthy discussion. And I will ask, would anybody like to read their favorite version of the Analects, or their version, if they should have one? Penny, please. Thank you.
Okay. How many verses do you want?
Just actually for this one, 21, right?
Okay.
Yep.
And this is the James Legging. The master said, "He who speaks without modesty will find it difficult to make his words good."
That's 20 on mine, so you probably would read the next one.
Okay. Chan Chang murdered the Duke Xian of Qi. Confucius bathed, went to court, and informed the Duke A, saying, "Chan Hang has slain his sovereign. I beg that you will undertake to punish him." 3. The Duke said, "Inform the chiefs of the 3 families of it." 4. Confucius retired and said, "Following in the rear of the great officers, I did not dare not to represent such a matter, and my prince says, inform the chiefs of the 3 families of it." 5. He went to the chiefs and informed them, but they would not act. Confucius then said, "Following in the rear of the great officers, I did not dare not to represent such a matter."
Thank you, Penny. Would anybody else like to read their version?
I can read.
Please, thank you, Joy.
All right. Chen Chenzi murdered Jian Gong. Confucius bathed and went to court, reporting on the incident to Duke I, saying, "Chen He has murdered his lord. I request that you chastise him." The Duke replied, "Reported to the chiefs of the 3 families." Confucius said, "Since I following in the rear of the Grand Master, I have no recourse but to report. My ruler has said, reported to the chiefs of the 3 families, and the 3 chiefs have said that there is nothing that can be done." Confucius said, "Since I follow in the rear of the Grand Master, I have no recourse but to report."
Thank you, Joy. So we will go to...
Aman, can you do it for me?
Yes, give me 1 second. Can we see it all right?
You got it.
So
Perfect.
Aman, today you do Jason and I do Aman.
Okay. So, verse 21. Chen Qingzi killed Duke Jing of Qi. Confucius bathed and went to court, reporting to Duke I of Lu. Chen Hong killed his lord. I request he be chastised by force. The Duke said, report it to the 3 chief masters. Confucius said, since I am one of the ministers, I have no choice but to report. But my lord said, report it to the 3 chief masters. He then reported it to the 3 chief masters. The request was denied. Confucius said, I am one of the ministers. I have no choice but to report. 1. Xian, Tian, Shangzi, killed Duke Xian of Qi and made a new ruler, Duke Ping. Oh, no, these aren't notes. Sorry. In 481 BCE, Confucius was 70 years old. Oh, no, these are your notes, correct, Jason?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's my note. Yeah.
My mistake.
So among you, anything you want to say about this one?
No, I'll let you speak first. If the thought comes to me, I'll go ahead and say after.
Yeah, basically this one I separated this one to itself because Chen Zi, okay, that's a significant issue because he killed the duke, his boss, and then put another prince in the throne. So 100 years later, this family, Chen family, and also sometimes called Tian, okay, Chen and Tian are the same family, okay. So, I think about 200 years later, they replace the duke, okay. So the duke family at this moment is the last name is Jiang, okay, and 200 years later has been replaced by the Chen family. So just like Lu, state of Lu, because they have the powerful minister. Okay, so same situation in the neighboring state Qi. They also have a powerful minister, which is the Chen family. So they even worse, okay, than state of Lu. So they kill the lord, the duke, and set up another young lord, okay, so they can have a fully control. Okay, so that's the situation. So when Confucius see this one, according to Confucius' moral standard, it's a terrible, terrible situation. How can you in the lower rank and kill the superior? So Confucius talked to the Duke I. This time Confucius already been, we can call retired or being fired. Okay, but during that time of the custom is once you have been in the royal court, you have a lifetime being in, even you don't have the power, but you still have to follow some ritual. That's why Confucius still go to his lord, say, okay, that's the situation happen. You should send the military to do something, okay? And the lord, which is the Duke I of state of Lu, since he has no power anyway, so he asked Confucius to ask the three powerful ministers, three family, which is Ji family, Su family, and Meng family. Three. So Confucius report that, and they say we don't have to do anything. Okay, so that's the account Confucius talking about. And I think I don't recall the translation. A lot of translation will translate as Confucius said, since I'm stayed behind the minister. But my translation basis, I think what Confucius means is I'm among, because Confucius is humble. So he said I stay behind, but actually what he meant is I'm part of the ministers. Okay, so I have the responsibility according to the ritual to report this one and give my suggestion. Okay, so this one is, I would say it's important because Confucius record what Confucius' behavior, okay, after he retired. Okay, so I will stop here, and Amang, if you have anything to say.
Yes, I would point out that this is the conflict of dueling loyalties. That on the one hand, Confucius is loyal to what is proper, and that is that this new upstart duke should not be in this place. This should not have gone down the way it did. And on the other hand, being part of the court, he is beholden to do what his lord says. Even though he has advice for his lord doesn't follow his advice and simply says, go do this instead. Go talk to the 3 other chief masters. Because maybe somebody with a bigger hat will be willing to shoulder the responsibility of doing what you're suggesting, but I won't. And there's a little bit of a lament at the end where he says, I am one of the ministers. I have no choice but to report. In other words, I am loyal to my master. I must follow what he told me to do. It's interesting to me because I wonder about the time of life where this was taken from Confucius's existence. Would this have been his message 10 years later, say, after he'd sort of grown greater disillusioned with the actual workings of the court? I don't have an answer for that, but this strikes me as someone caught in the duty of being a functionary and now having sort of a buyer's remorse about it. I think it's an interesting little vignette in the life of the master, because so often it is him simply pontificating on what someone else should do or how others should behave. But here he's caught in his own dilemma of loyalties, and his own actions are what are at stake. And he says, I have no choice but to report. We could probably game out the epilogue to this based on that. But I do think that at the end of his life, he might have looked back at this moment and said, no, I had a higher duty to all under heaven. And so I needed to either resign my post, or I needed to, remonstrate with my master more clearly that his decisions were wrong. That's just my impression. I'd be very curious to hear everyone else's.
So go ahead and raise your hand if you have a quick comment about this text. It's a little bit longer than usual, but we'll go to Quan first. Thank you. Then followed by
this event happened in 481 BCE, so 2 years before Confucius' death. That Chengzi was an aristocrat from the Principality of Cheng, precisely, and his family would change their name from Cheng to Tian, T-I-A-N, later on. What happened in 481 BCE is interesting because a century later, in 386 BCE, one of his offspring of Chengzi will simply usurp the throne of the legitimate ducal line of the Jiang, J-I-A-N-G. So the Jiang were dukes of Qi since 1046 BCE. So they began at the same time with the Zhou royal house. And they became puppets between 481 BCE and 386 BCE. And they lost their throne in 386 BCE. So Confucius in 481 BCE, I would like to remind everyone that Confucius came back from a 14 years long exile in 484 BCE. So when he came back, he was perfectly aware that his political career was finished. And he came back because one of his disciples, Ran Qiu, managed to win a battle for the Duke of Lu. And he asked as a reward, if you will, that his master Confucius would be recalled from his exile, and his wish has been granted in 484 BCE, some months after his victory. So Confucius coming back to Lu in 484 BC was perfectly once again aware that his political career was finished, and he was offered a kind of ceremonial role. And when he approached the Duke Ai to report the event, he was perfectly aware that it was, I don't want to say a joke, but let's say a ceremonial report. And he knew perfectly that nothing would happen because of his report. And he was very ritualistic, going to the three grandees to report to those three grandees, which is the three leaders of the three big families in the Principality of Lu. Because once again, I want to remind everyone that most of the principalities of China at the time were principalities from the family of the king of Zhao. Okay, because when in 1046 BCE, the Zhou dynasty began, the king would send his brothers and his cousins to the different principalities to rule them. And at the time of Confucius, maybe 80% of the leaders of the different principalities were more or less cousins of the Zhou king, even if the Zhou king lost his true power at the time. So it was a kind of pact between them that if one of them has problem, the others should go to his rescue. But of course, it was very theoretical, and it was not necessarily acted in reality. I stop here. Even if in the before Confucius, it happened that sometimes interests and rituals would coincide, and sometimes an usurper would be punished, but at the condition that the interests of some principalities would coincide with the rituals, of course. So here we are in the domain of realpolitik, and stop here.
Excellent. Thank you, Quan. We'll go next to Mark.
Thanks, Joe. I'm not sure if I still have a question because Aman and Quan have elucidated it so clearly. I did get the feeling here that Confucius was understood that his place was not to be the first minister in this case. And Quan is saying his position was more ceremonial. And I think Quan also implied that Confucius knew that his advice would not be taken. It does sound like it's repeating a line in here, doesn't it? Is there some repetition?
Yes, it's a repetition. It's a repetition. Yeah, that's the kind of during this time I find out in the Analects there's a lot of repetition. Yeah, another repetition.
Yeah.
To say that someone should be punished for usurping, wouldn't that have involved starting a war?
Absolutely, and it happened before Confucius. That war were started because of usurpation.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, because you have to think about that's a feudalism system, and during that time, it kind of thinking about that we are the big family, right? So your brother's house has some problem. That's my duty to take care of that. So so that's kind of thinking. But Confucius represented the time of the moral standards start to change, right? You start to see this kind of situation happen. Your brother has some problem, and then I say, okay, that I'm going to take care of, help my brother. But turn out, they say, no, that's their business. I think that's kind of the morality has been changed. I think.
Yes. If I may interrupt, it's like in all big families, okay? Even the king, who is the eldest member of their line. They don't care about him. They would just usurp his privileges. So what do you think of the smaller cousins of the smaller principalities? Let's forget about that.
And does it also imply that Confucius heard about this murder before his duke, which suggests either that he was very well connected, or maybe even the duke knew about it before Confucius told him? And
I
yeah,
sorry, Mark, I interrupted you because
it almost seems as if the Duke I wanted to wash his hands of it by passing the buck.
but you understood everything, Mark. And even if Confucius had a big network through his disciples in different principalities, and I would say that he had a kind of unofficial, not spying, but let's say intelligent network, I would believe that. But I'm sure that the Duke was aware at the same time, or even a little bit before him, and he just ignored the stuff because he knew perfectly that his underlings would not start a war for his cousin.
Or maybe they were happy they got rid of him.
Absolutely. And once again, it's a tragedy for the Ancien Régime. But at the same time, if we look at the big trend of universal history, that kind of behavior would make possible the creation of the first Chinese empire in 221 BCE. So if we look at the big picture, it was in the good direction of universal history.
It does seem to go counter to the role ethics, actually, that the social hierarchy, if they're not necessarily an exemplar for the rest of society, that is going to be end up problematic.
Yeah, I know. You know, it was an old plutocratic oligarchy that became corrupt and corrupt and corrupt, and universal history would sweep them away for another form of government called empire. And paradoxically, because in English the word empire has a negative undertone, okay, but the Chinese empire was much more open to the commoner than the old feudal order.
Hey, Jason.
Yeah, great. I think the significance of this paragraph, okay, is mark the how alienation, right? So you kind of feel like indifference for your neighboring state.
Yes.
What's going on, right? So what's going on, just if you think about big family, what's going on in my brother, okay, something happened in my brother, and I just say, oh, that's not my business, right? So before I read this one, I mean, long time ago, I feel this one is like not much sense. But right now I read it, I have a strong feeling, okay? I feel like people start to ignore what's your neighborhood happen, okay? What's happening in my neighbor? It just ignore it. And they also very show the Duke I of Lu kind of as also powerless. He asked Confucius, ask the three ministers, because he also cannot do anything, okay? The three ministers, three families, they are in charge of everything. So I'm not saying I agree or this one is good or bad, but I'm talking about that's Confucius' theory, right? The old social order has been changed. So I think this paragraph is even very simple, but I think it's really capture that kind of feeling. during Confucius' time. And I do feel, how does Confucius feel? Okay, how does Confucius feel during this event? Something serious happened, but my Lord had kind of like, I cannot do anything, ask the ministers. And he asked the ministers. The ministers say, oh, no, I don't know what's their answer, but basically they're not going to do anything. So I can feel, okay, the feeling Confucius had during this time. Okay, and that he was very old during this time, probably around 70. Okay, so I think I'm very touched on this. But one thing I like to ask, I have a question to ask. I did hear a few people probably speak sort of Chinese dialect, Huang, I believe, Joey, Kevin. Okay, so I like to ask, in my dialogue, we know this one talk about Chen, right? Chen family. And then later on, they call the Tian family. Okay. Okay. So in English or in Mandarin, they are totally different. But in my dialogue, okay, they are the same. Okay. Chen and Tian. In my dialogue, okay, the pronunciation is exactly the same. And in my Taiwanese tradition, we always have a saying, Chen and Tian never get married each other. Okay. So because they are the same family. So I don't know, I just like to know, my curious, Kevin, Huang, or Joey, probably you speak different dialects, does you guys have the same thing or not?
And Jason, are you speaking a kind of Hokkien or of?
Hokkien is this way. Hokkien is saying that is the Chen and the Tian. Okay, don't get married. Okay, so
Okay.
you date you Chen family date a family called Tian family. Then parents say no, you don't get married because you are the same family. And
Yeah.
the pronunciation is exactly the same.
Absolutely. Well, it's not the case in Cantonese, and as you know, it's not the case in Putonghua.
Good to know. Thank you, Jason. I'm from not part of China. I don't hear this. Maybe south of part of.
So sounds like Hokkien is flipped. I believe they are the same. But probably during the ancient time, the pronunciation probably the same. And that's why.
I believe your observation. Yes, those is lost. We don't record those history, but embedded in the local.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any other comments? I mean, I do want to come back to this question that actually Jason posed to us as to how Confucius would have felt during this particular moment of time, because actually I would imagine it would be some type of despair when you see, such a crime to take place at such a high level. And then what does that mean for the rest of society and the stability of it? The responsibility factor that people are abdicating the responsibility and in their hierarchy has to be of great distress. Especially somebody who has been up to, so focused on playing your role and the ethics that go along with your position. And so I think that that's something that's really important to explore. We've talked a little bit about role ethics in particular, and the idea of duty when it comes to Confucius in other chapters. But this is something I would like to explore as we move on to numbers 20. I want to get my email up there. I believe it's.
I just dropped it in the chat, Joe.
Oh, thank you. All right. I was off the.
And I think Mark's got one comment here.
Okay, so it's 22 and 24 we'll be doing next. Go ahead, Mark.
Joseph, just to build on what you were asking about, since we have the whole group here, is this a case of a violation of some sort of hierarchy of ritual? Or is the hierarchy, if there is one, what takes place within one kingdom? And between kingdoms, then you're talking about relationships between hierarchies for which there may not be the same kind of ritual.
There's the same, I guess they would have the same structure, right? So therefore there would be the same role.
Yeah, what I like to say is,
Good question.
I think Mark make a good point. There's a different kind of relationship, right? One is a hierarchy, right, from the superior to inferior. Okay, so upper and the lower, and the one is a parallel, right, like a brotherhood, like the kingdom to kingdom, right? So you can see the lower ranking start to violate, okay, take over the higher ranking. That's one violation. And then the indifference between kingdom and the kingdom, or you will say brotherhood, they start to ignore what's happening on your neighbor, which is your brother. Okay, and then I think that's the situation. Confucius feel despair. I think that's my understanding. So many years later, I mean, since I first read and then I reread this paragraph, I start to feel, okay, Confucius theory. Yeah.
Well,
I would say here that the first violation of hierarchy, of course, has already been done. We in 481 BCE, when the Western Zhou lost a major battle in 770 BCE, they moved to Luoyang to the east. Let's say that between 770 BCE to 720 BCE, the first 50 years after their defeat, there was still a certain hope that they would go back to their heydays. But from 700 BC, let's say, okay, to take a round number, most of the Chinese at the time understood that their heydays are definitely finished. And in 481 BCE, it's practically 2 centuries later. So it was a very slow process of unraveling. But I would say that during that unraveling, they kept enough prestige to transmit the cultural legacy. And once again, Confucius always said that he did not invent anything, that he was only a humble transmitter. And he was right, okay? It was not false modesty. It was absolutely right. He was simply transmitting the epistemological legacy of the Zhou royal house. But his originality was to open that classical education to the commoners rather than to keep it only for the nobility. And that was his revolution. And that revolution changed completely the history of China. And when I said 10 minutes ago that empire is not a dirty word for Chinese, because the Chinese empire was much more open for the commoners than the old feudal orders. And I stop here.
So excuse me, I'd like to ask a question, okay? Kwang, you talk about empire, because I was educated in Asian. So does empire have a negative meaning?
Well, in English, okay, but here we are in the domain of mythology, my dear Jason.
Yeah, I know. I just asked
for the Americans, because they liberated themselves in 1776 from the British Empire, the word empire is the dirty word because it represents oppression and dictatorship.
Okay, I never think this way. Does Joe or Armand, do you agree? Or
Yeah,
There's definitely a mixed connotation. There's a romanticizing, and there is that negative connotation in some quarters about the American Empire or the British Empire. The whole idea of an emperor we get out of Rome, and Caesar becoming emperata by basically stepping all over the rights of the Senate and that. So there is a connotation there, but there's also a romance to it that says they've always been trying to get back to the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was the peak of Western civilization in some ways, and so it holds dual connotation in most modern English. But I get what Quan is saying. When you say the empire in China, you're talking about legacy. You're talking about 5,000 years, which you cannot walk around China without seeing posters everywhere. 5,000 years, because they insist that's how long it's been an empire.
Okay, thank you very much. Because I think I still, be honest, before today, I still think empire as a positive name. So I was wrong.
Jason, I am very happy you are true Chinese.
Yeah, we do see empire. I do see empire as a positive meaning. Yeah. So
well, maybe in 10 more years in the States, you'll see it as a negative. No, I'm just joking. So thank you for that question. Yeah, let's go to 22 and 23, 24. Would anybody like to read their version?
Want me to read Leggy?
That would be wonderful. Thank you, Peggy.
Okay.
Back.
Chapter 22. Zulu asked how a ruler should be served. The master said, "Do not impose on him, and moreover, withstand him to his face." Chapter 23. The master said, "The progress of the superior man is upwards. The progress of the mean man is downwards." Chapter 24. The master said, "In ancient times, men learned with a view to their own improvement. Nowadays, men learn with a view to the approbation of others."
Thank you, Benny. So would anybody else like to read?
Okay, I will read by
Sure.
Charles Muller.
Thank
Okay,
you.
1422. Zilu asked how to deal with a ruler. Confucius said, if you have to oppose him, don't do it by deceit. 1423. The master said, the noble man penetrates that which is above. The inferior man penetrates that which is below. The master said, the ancient scholars study for their own improvement. Modern scholars study to impress others.
Thank you, Joy. And then now we will go to the translation.
Okay, I'm doing the part of Jason. So 1422. Zulu asked how to serve the Lord. The master said, you cannot deceive him, but you can offend him. 23. The master said, Junsa succeed or strive upward. Small men succeed or strive downward. 24. The master said, in the past, men learned to improve themselves. Today, men learn to impress people. I'll turn it over to Jason.
Okay, thank you, thank you, Amar. I really like everyone give me suggestion on especially 22 and 23. Give me some suggestion on that. 22. I really like this one, and I believe I translate very good. Because the Chinese word here use the word fan. Okay, that means commit. Okay, when you commit a crime, that's the word Chinese use. So the way I I'm quite happy on my translation on this one, 22. Okay, Zilu asks how to serve the Lord. The master said, you cannot deceive him, but you can offend, okay, him. So I think the Chinese use this word "fan." Okay, it means commit a crime. Okay, so I really like this sentence, and I do see that's the right way to treat your boss. Okay, you should have the guts to offend him. Okay, I think that's the true loyalty. So I'm afraid this kind of spirit had been lost during the Chinese tradition. Okay, or a lot of people see. So that's why I really like this one, and I quite proud of myself to translate this way. Let's put this way. Okay, not humble. Just try not to be humble at this moment. Okay, at 23. Okay, I really want anyone give me suggestion because they use the word "da." Usually, I translate as a be successful. Okay, so I see a good translation. For example, they translate as progress. You make a progress upward, and the small man make a progress downward. Okay, so I think the making progress is probably another good way to translate. But of course, I would be happy if everyone can give me some suggestion about this word, da. Okay, and what Confucius mean is not very clear. Okay, what does Confucius mean, upward or downward? So they have many interpretations. You can see upward means metaphysical, moral. Okay, that's what you try to achieve. And downward means get your reputation, get the financial reward as a downward. So Confucius doesn't say very clear. It's a little bit ambiguity here, but I think that's up to your interpretation. 24, the master said in the past, I think this one should be easy, okay? I think all the translation probably almost the same, right? In the past, man, in the past means that's the proper way, right? The men learn to improve themselves, and today men learn to impress people, like social media. Okay, I think even today, the people, usually the young generation, what their life is try to impress other people, and that's why the social media become popular. Okay, I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate you keeping my suggestion of strive. I did think in terms of translating da as progress, but it felt, although it feels correct, it has a positive connotation, and to progress downwards is almost oxymoronic, which was why I went with strive. But to strive downwards is also semi-oxymoronic. So you're right. It's a challenge to find a good fit for that term. But I want to offer an interpretation of 1423 because it comes right on the heels of 1422, where the master's telling Zulu, you can offend your lord. You can't deceive him, but you can remonstrate with him. And I keep going back to this idea of remonstration because it is something that was fundamental to Confucius philosophy that was intentionally rooted out through the system of acculturation in China over centuries and centuries, because nobody in charge wants somebody nipping at their heels, as it were. And it became much better to gain some measure of success by not being the squeaky wheel in court. When he says junzi, strive or succeed upwards, and small men strive or succeed downwards, a possible interpretation of this, you could think just in terms of a management sense. If you are a minister whose attentions, focus, and effort are all pointed and directed at your underlings, we call that a micromanager in modern parlance. But this is also the sign of a small man. I often call them petty tyrants who wield their power over those in a lesser position, striving downwards. To be striving upwards would be to take that same sort of authority, expertise, power, and point it towards your superiors, people that you take a risk bringing something to, but it is the character of a junzi to take that risk, to go to somebody who could have you beheaded if they don't like what you have to say, and still strive to make that person do better, because you'll get A, more done through that person, and B, show a better character as just a person. That was how I saw these two as being linked together, or a way I saw these two being linked together. And I agree, impressing versus improving. I think kids these days was first said by Plato, and it's as true today as it was then. Kids these days, but most of us mature out of it.
I'm wondering when that'll occur for me. Would anybody like to comment? I'm inclined to comment. I have a lot to say about these here, but if anybody wishes to go first, go right ahead. Okay, Quan.
I would like to propose two possibilities for the word da, and would not be oxymoronic, in the sense that the junzi gets through to what is exalted. I would suggest first the junzi master his life through what is exalted. That is one possibility, master his life, or navigate his life through what is exalted. And which go a little bit in the sense of the strive proposed by Amon, and would be a little bit less oxymoronic, because navigate and master his life is, let's say, bigger in meaning. But it's one possibility among others. Because, and once again, I think that it's about the epistemological journey, in the sense that the junzi will master his life, will navigate his life to what is exalted, meaning to the upper trigram, okay, to beauty, goodness, and truth. And the small man will navigate his life, or will direct his life through to what is base, okay? So using flattery, using connections, using shenanigans to get to his goals. So I understand that paragraph in that way.
Excuse me, Kwang. Okay, so sounds like your understanding of this paragraph is different from me. Okay, so you do the words da as a means, not the end, right? I read it as the end. You be successful in this one. Sounds like you look at the word da as the means, okay, which is the means to be successful, right? One is 君子 is used let's say good way or better way or upper way, and the small man doing is the lower way, right? I just asked the question. I'm not saying you are right or I'm right, but that's my question.
You understood perfectly my perspective. Okay.
Okay,
because,
so I like to suggest the group. Okay, they have the two different way of understanding, right? My way of understanding is talking about the end. Okay, so you has been achieved on the upward. you have been achieved on the downward. But Quant's interpretation, which is makes sense, a lot of sense also. Quant's understanding is the means. You be successful using the proper way or using a small man's way. Okay, so that's Quant's understand. And we are not going to decide who is right, but I just offer, we have two different understanding on this parable.
Thank you, Allison.
Can I interrupt for 1 second, Allison, with an editorial? I kind of agree with you, Quan, personally, but Jason's choice of terminology, I tried to find a completed sort of way of going about it because I did understand that that was your interpretation, though I almost went with reach if I was trying to think of something more active.
Yeah, that's why Aman would suggest the strive, which means it's a means, okay? And then I do is succeed, okay? Or be successful, okay? Which means the end, okay? So that's the difference. So we don't know who is right, but basically they have the two ways to think about it.
Allison, thank you.
Yeah, my interpretation, which is not based on the words at all, that I was thinking that it was so often you see that people are not focusing on improving themselves because it's so much easier to just blame others, and I see it more and more, I mean, I think it's kind of like a big thing right now where like when I was a kid, parents never went to schools to complain. And nowadays the parents will go to school to complain about things rather than blaming their own children for their behavior. And I even have friends who are college professors who say they see the same thing even at college level, which is kind of shocking to me because I'm like, they're adults. They're should be responsible for themselves. So it's kind of interesting, like why as a society we've switched to that. I don't really know. And I know that's not quite the same thing as impressing others, but it's but yeah, there is a difference between trying to improve and impressing others because they're not really the same thing. Because when you're just working on your own improvement, it's sort of inner directed on focusing on what's inside and fixing that. But impressing others is more what's on the external, which is not always the correct way of improving yourself. So there's just some thoughts.
May I comment to that? I think that that's an excellent observation, that it's more of an internal validation versus an external validation. And we can see the progression actually throughout the text. If you think about it, past chapter, I don't know, perhaps Quan or Aman or Jason could help me with this, that there was a one particular passage where he would accept a piece of meat as tuition or as a way of paying for school because he was letting anyone in that actually really want to learn for learning's sake. And I think this gets to something much deeper, and perhaps if I don't know if you recall that passage, I will look for it. But the importance of it, what's that? Oh,
I just dropped it in the chat. It's 7.7.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. No, I think, yeah, exactly. It's 7.7. Yeah, and thank you for doing that. I think that this is a an important point because ultimately it's the pursuit of wisdom, and wisdom can't be associated with pursuing external means because then you're dictated by things that are just what the crowd is doing, not what your internal self is doing. So you're kind of outsourcing your autonomy to a certain degree. That's the way I would look at it. And I also think you've made a very good point, Allison, when you were talking about the idea of taking responsibility, which actually kind of relates back to 23, where there was an abdication of responsibility as well within the hierarchy. So it's kind of this theme that you're starting to see that, yeah, when as far as self-motivation and not necessarily looking at for the outside for some type of validation. Anyway, so I'll leave it with Mark and then David.
I wanted to ask about 23. I was reminded of something, Quan, that you had said, I think last class or maybe the meeting before that, about Ren. And you called it perfect humanity, being in a group and perceiving the needs of everyone and using that information to further the common goals. Was pretty much what you said. And when I think of the gentleman, you know, penetrates to what is above, the Jinzi, I'm thinking that his or her humanity would allow them to be able to find the correct means to make themselves understood and to exert their influence with someone of a higher rank, which in 21 that we started with tonight, of course, Confucius was not able to do.
Absolutely. Because I would like to remind that the Chinese name of the guy having achieved the last stage of epistemological development is called a Sheng Ran. And the word Sheng is written with an ear, a mouth, and the image of a gentleman in court robe. So that Sheng Ran, which is the perfect embodiment of perfect humanity, is capable to hear the will of heavens, hence the ear, but is also capable to state those reality to everyone, including the people in power, hence the mouth, and hence the simplified image of a gentleman in court robe.
Are you calling on me?
Yes.
Okay, sounds a little fuzzy to me at the moment, but okay. Yeah, the internal and external motivations, it's not, we do have these conflicts coming up in these discussions and how much the individual has to rely on their own integrity and making their judgments not based on external certain social pressures and pleasing people. But they have to have developed some sort of universal understanding in order to do that. So the universal understanding has to come through their own ability to learn and check what they're learning, rationalize it, and not learn the wrong things. So it's really on them to be filtering what they're learning as they're learning. They have to be a good student. You can't be told how to be a student entirely. You really have to figure it out, largely on your own. But there are some things you have to learn externally, and that is you have to learn from your parents. You have to learn filial respect. You have to learn your role in your civil society, in your family, and you need these social wisdoms. And that is external knowledge. It's particular to where you're growing up and the structures in your society. This is external. You have to come to understand those in order to express. You have to see the social patterns revealed to know the vernacular of your society and foreign cultures too, which is a different vernacular. And demanding that understanding, you have to have put together the external details that let you be respectful in your culture and in other cultures. So you have to, this is why you have to have so much learning and respect for the way your family imbues you with knowledge. You have to really, be taking that on. You say, oh, that's stupid that you do that. But no, you have to be respectful of it enough to really get it and to treat them in a way that you're giving them respect for the way they're doing. And even when they make mistakes, you're defending them. We've seen that in law, right? You're not humiliating them, even if you can be correcting in some way. You're not turning them in for breaking the law. You're like, so you have to put that external knowledge and universalize it and respect it. But so you are taking external forces in, but you're developing your own integrity to make these universals and become something more. So you're looking for that perfection to be part of your Quan's word epistemology. So that's really what you're doing in addition to the external. You have the internal, external. It's an interesting battle. Confucius is respecting both.
So can I just ask for clarification? I'm trying to sum this up in maybe 2 cents. Would you say this is, you have to know the rules in order to break them, and that the universal is virtue? Would that be
I like that way of talking. I like to hear what Aman and Quan, and
No,
Jason.
they might say I'm wrong, so you can't.
Okay, don't call on them. Just keep them muted.
Let's just keep going.
I totally respect what you're saying.
I
Joe.
love wisdom, but it's not too much. But no, go ahead, please.
So I checked the da, that words is the meaning is to lead to or to go to someplace, and to reach to or arrive at. So the da, this word in the verse 23, I think something that the 君子 that is doing something. 上 that means upward. Yeah, exactly. So usually they were doing some self-improvement, like in better state. Then the 小人, that means the person that will do something maybe the worst. Probably they won't check, or they won't, they won't change. They were always doing the same mistake again. So they were doing something like destructive, downward, like that means to make it worse. So that's what I think, the person has wisdom that they were doing something to help them, even self-improvement in a better way, okay, in progress. And the other one is probably doing maybe destructive way that, again and again, and to reach, to the worst situation. So that is what I understand, and from the verse 23.
Thank you, Joy. Aman, do you want to comment?
Yeah, actually, Joy brought me back around full circle. And so I'm going to tie some thread around all of this, if I can, by going to a cliche of comedy. The cliche being that good comedy punches upward and bad comedy punches downward. That's an expression used by comics about comedy and about that, the whole sort of hermeneutic you need to bring to the art of being a comedian. If you're punching upward, you are getting a laugh and you're poking fun at the king. You are a court jester. If you're punching downward, you're a bully. And tying this back with what Joy was just saying, the idea of da as a single word, which incidentally is a homonym to the expression da, to punch, which is why I actually was thinking of it, is both a completed action, to have been punched, and an action in motion, to be punching. But to a punch, or just to say one punches, that can be ambiguously active or completed. That's kind of what I think Jason is trying to straddle here, is looking for, and I'm not suggesting punch, though I do think it would be a very humorous play on words, because again, da is a homonym. But you're looking for a verb that straddles that line between an action in progress and an action completed. And which is why I get your inclination towards success. I like navigate. I also like reach because I think it's both in progress and a completed thing. But it's one of these times where translation doesn't have a direct corollary in the English language. You can't just point to something in the English dictionary and say, that's what that word means. And so if you da upwards, you're striving to be a junzi. If you da downwards, you are, being a bully. You're punching down. You're doing the wrong thing. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
Thank you for both of you for those remarks. Very much appreciate those. Would anybody else like to comment on these? Going once, going twice. Okay, then let's, Penny, would you mind reading the next section, which would include 25, 26, and 27?
You want to read just verse 25?
And 26 and 27 as well.
Okay. Hu Yu sent a messenger with friendly inquiries to Confucius. Confucius sat with him and questioned him. What, said he, is your master engaged in? The messenger replied, my master is anxious to make his false view, but he has not yet succeeded. He then went out, and the master said, a messenger indeed, a messenger indeed. Chapter 26. The master said, he who is not in any particular office has nothing to do with plans for the administration of its duties. Chapter 27. The philosopher saying said, the superior man in his thoughts does not go out of his place.
Thank you so much, Penny. Joy, would you mind reading?
Yes.
Thank you.
14.
Did you read 30?
No.
No. We are reading. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Or unless you want to read. Okay.
Okay, so 1425. Qu Yu sent a messenger to Confucius. Confucius sat down with him and asked him, saying, what is your master like? The messenger replied, my master wants to decrease his faults, but is not able to do so. The messenger laughed, and the Confucius said, what a messenger, what a messenger. 1426. The master said, if you don't have an official position, you should not make plans for administration. Zhenzi said, the noble man doesn't worry about those things which are outside of his control. 1427. The master said, the noble man is humble in his speech, but superb in his action.
Thank you for that. I really like that translation for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 1425. Zhu Yi sent a messenger to Confucius. Confucius sat down with him and asked, how is your master doing? He replied, my master wants to err less, but is unable to. The messenger left, and the master said, what a messenger, what a messenger. 26. The master said, not his place, not seeking his government. Songzi said, a junzi thought should be limited to his governmental positions. 27. The master said, a junzi is ashamed of speaking more than acting. Oh.
Yeah, thank you, Amam. When I hear you read my translation, I think it's improved a lot. So, okay, so 1425, Qu Boyu, okay, he is a famous person. Okay, he is a Confucius friend. That's why I did have other chapter talking about Qu Boyu, book 15. Okay, so when he called Confucius, he called him not the master, not the Confucius, he called him Chu. Okay, Kong Chu, he called him his given name. So we know Qu Boyu, this guy, is Confucius' friend. Okay. Secondly, Qu Boyu also famous in if you are familiar or you are in my Asian philosophies reading on Saturday afternoon. Qu Boyu, that's Zhuangzi. Okay, in Zhuangzi's writing, Qu Boyu is a Taoist master. Okay, so just a note on this one. So this one, I think last week we discussed about how to talk about how to present your master or your boss, right? In Chinese society, you want to be humble, okay? But I can be humble, even I'm very successful. I can say, oh, no, I just do my work, I just lucky. You know, I can be humble in this way. I have no talent, I just be lucky. I can be humble this way. But how about my subordinate, right? How about my son? When people ask my son, say, hey, how's your father doing? Or people ask my subordinate, how's your boss doing, right? He cannot show off, say, oh, my boss or my father is a wonderful man. He cannot do this because it's arrogant. But how can he be humble? Okay, for me or for his boss, right? It's a very difficult job here, right? So that's why Confucius say, what a messenger, what a message, right? Because Confucius asked how is your master doing? And his answer is, my master want to err less, but unable to. So in Confucius' point of view, that's a very proper answer, right? Because you kind of help your master be humble, okay, but you don't humiliate him, okay. So that's why Confucius say, what a message, what a message, right? 26. I think this one is a repetition. Book 8, okay, but it's add one more. In book 8, only have the first part, which is the master said, not in his place, not seeking his government, okay. And this chapter add one more. It's Zhengzi said, a Junzi's thought should be limited to his governmental position, or you should be limited to his position. So I like everyone to think about this situation. In my personal opinion, which is different than the most of teaching, Confucius teaching, okay. In my opinion, Zhengzi, who is the very young disciple, probably the youngest disciple, and he lived to almost 100 years old. So his teaching become standard teaching of Confucius. And in my personal opinion, I do see Zhengzi, this person who limited, okay, Confucius thinking. So this paragraph really represents the different logic of thinking between Confucius and the Zhengzi. Because Confucius said, not in his position, not seeking his government. That means you don't overstep your position, okay? You don't overstep, okay, on your step here. Don't overstep. But the 曾子's comment would be a 君子's thought should be limited to his position. So that means his definition of your duty is a limited one. So your thought, you cannot think about something outside your position. Okay. So I do see this kind of logic or philosophy is really limited to Confucius thought. That again, that's my personal thinking. I do think Zhengzi has been limited what Confucius teaching. The original Confucius teaching is greater than Zhengzi's thinking. So again, I just want to say that's my personal opinion, and that I believe most of the Chinese, I will not say scholar, but most of the people read Confucius probably disagree with me. So that's just what I like to say. 27, a master said, a 君子 is ashamed of speaking more than acted. Okay, so this one we discussed last week about the feeling of shameful. Okay, so I do like, I think is Joey read the translation, humble in his speech and super in his action. I think this translation really captured the essence of this chapter. But unfortunately, I make myself to translate word by word. Okay, so even I totally agree on what Joey read, but I just cannot translate in this way because it violates my principle of translation. So I have to translate 君子 is ashamed of speaking more than action. Okay, because that's kind of the word-to-word translation. So I stop here, and Amang, if you have anything to say.
Yeah, I like these three passages. Chuba, you sending a messenger and Confucius applauding the messenger. I think there's something almost subtle at work here, which is he's saying, what a messenger, what a messenger. The messenger's character is elevated because of his employee under Chibo Yu. Chibo Yu is a laudable and admirable person to Confucius, so much so that even his messenger, when he shows up, brings just the right words to really impress Confucius, and not because he's working at impressing, not because he's putting up, you know, a Facebook post, but because he's saying, my master's not perfect, but he's working harder at being less mistaken, making less errors, doing less bad, which is about the best thing Confucius could think of a person trying to do. So I kind of like the dual action of, you're in the employee of such a good person, your character has been elevated by it. What a messenger. But the next two just scream colloquialisms. 1426 is not my monkey, not my circus. And you could read it, not your monkey, not your circus. It's still the same sentiment. Know your place and be in that place. However, I agree with Jason, actually, that Zhengzi's epilogue here, a Junzi's thought should be limited to his government position. Those are his words. Those are not the master's words. And I don't think the master would agree with him. But the question that rolls through my mind then is, in the compilation of the Analects, why put together his commentary from this? This could be one occasion where Confucius was saying something for the benefit of somebody else, but one of his students took it as gospel and got a lesson from it not intended for him. If that's the case, then how did it maintain its position in the Analects? How did it stay there, though? These are just questions that come to my mind when reading this. And the last one is, put up or shut up. Actions speak louder than words. A junsa actions are what they are responsible for. And this time we parsed the word ashamed before, but here I think ashamed works well, because you should be ashamed if you're talking more than you're acting. If you talk a good game but do a whole lot of nothing, you should be ashamed of yourself. And I think that's both the master sentiment and his student sentiment, and generations and generations of Confucian inspired individuals impressions is you better do. Don't tell me, show me. And that's even true in modern day China. It's much more important that you be able to demonstrate your capability, and pretty important that you don't talk a whole lot about it, which is why you'll see that humility come back and back. And also why a lot of Chinese find Westerners just jaw-droppingly rude for how much bolster and speak they are willing to do. And then the question of how much action do we actually see is always lingering on their minds.
Yeah, thank you, Amam. I'm sorry, I probably have to leave in 1 minute. Okay, so really, I think we will read another 2 chapters, and then so I have to leave now, and then thank you, Amam and Joe, to host for me, and thank you everyone, and I'll see you next week. And one more thing I would like to say, I really think our discussion is unique way to read Confucius, okay, Analects. And some of people here, Kevin, Joey, Kwang, probably already read in some way to have that. And I think you guys probably will agree with me that's our unique way to read Confucius. And I believe that's the best way. And then that's probably the right way to read Confucius Analects. And I hope I can promote this method of reading to the greater Chinese society, China, Taiwan, Japan, Korean, and I think that's the right way to read it, So anyway, thank you very much. And then I really appreciate everyone's contribution, and everyone have a different opinion. I don't think we need to have a consensus, and then just leave it open. I think that's the right way to read. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, and then see you next week.
Thank you, Jason. And look forward to seeing you again next week, if not sooner. David.
Right. I was curious, I guess 26, we sort of ameliorated some of the things that scratch me about 26. But, on the face of it, and maybe it's because it's a student, not Confucius, is like saying this. On the face of it, it sort of sounds like it's saying, don't think about what's not your job. But that limits you from thinking about the larger picture, maybe discussing it with people, learning the greater situation within which you function in your official capacities. So it seems like, as we said, a limiting thing. Why would that be of value? Is it that the word thought in Chinese has a slightly different connotation on it? Like you're chatting about it, or you're dwelling on it, as opposed to, thinking, the internal learn, process, keep your eyes open, and that, because I can't understand saying don't think about the government you're working in. You're supposed to serve a government that overall is doing good. That was part of the prior lessons. So You see my conflict here, or is this sort of, this is what Confucius didn't say, just be aware of that, and like, don't take this to heart in a full-hearted way. That's my problem. Thanks.
I'm going to jump in here real quick because what David asked is interesting. The word that you're actually kind of mulling over is the word zi, and it consider would be another way of thinking, of interpreting it. So to think or to consider, it does mean what's going on inside one's head. I agree with you. I do think that as a limiting statement, it feels very out of context. But if the context was a student who was saying, did you see what that court, attaché was wearing? It looked totally inappropriate. I think that maybe we need to talk. And it was like, focus on your job. Well, stop paying attention to things that aren't important to this job. In that instance, the lesson is germane, and it's not meant to be universally limiting. It's just in a particular context. But you get the youngest student in the crowd who hears this and thinks, oh, don't pay attention, put the blinders on, focus on your job. They learn the wrong lesson from it. That is a very plausible interpretation of this. But again, I got to bring up the question. How does this then make it into the canon that is the Analects? Because these words have been pored over, scrutinized, and examined probably as much as any other text on the planet. And so for this to remain means that somebody is getting something of value out of it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and it can apply even at higher levels. That's for sure. It really can. It's a good point. Thanks.
Would anybody else like to comment on any of these? The reoccurring theme of humility, or the importance of one's actions. Essentially, I think that's managing character ultimately. So I'll just put those two things out there, and we can talk about them in greater detail as we go, as we continue, but we will be reading hopefully 2 more chapters this evening. So Mark and Quan.
I was thinking how interesting it was what Jason was saying about the way in which he thought Zhenzu, or I'm forgetting how to pronounce his name, the later philosopher, he said the youngest of Confucius's disciples who became a sort of authoritative figure, limits what Confucius is saying. I wonder if you could put Jason's number 26 back up for a sec, because I'm looking at the Lao, and the leggy seems very specific. In the leggy, it's more like, he who is not in any particular office has nothing to do with plans for the administration of its duties. That sounds like good advice for a young rising minister. Don't stick your head in places where you're going to get into trouble. But in Lao, he says, do not concern yourself with matters of government unless they are the responsibility of your office. And I think there's an ambiguity in there, because you might say, oh, such and such is not directly part of my office, but it's part of the responsibility that I look into something. Or it might be part of my responsibility to question my superiors. And now, what is Jason? I'm going to try to increase it on the screen. Not in his place, not seeking his government. I thought that was one of the more very enigmatic of Jason's translations.
It is, but it's accurate. Not located and not it reads very close to the Chinese in the sense that Leggy gets very wordy because it's a little anachronistic. He was writing Victorian English and he wanted to elucidate as much as possible and make it sound like it was a scholarly work. In that Chinese language and grammar and word structure doesn't necessarily have as many unnecessary adjectives as we need in the English language to express a similar idea. And so having a terse version of it, I think, is accurate. Anyone else want to comment though on it? Yeah, Quan, you've got your hand up. I'll leave it up if you want to jump on this one.
Yeah. Sure. Do you hear me?
We do.
Okay, so 不在其位，不谋其政. I think that 谋 means strategy, stratagem, strategy to think in advance, stuff like that. I would say that 26 for me is is a pair with 27. Okay, so in 27 the lesson is clear. Okay, that in 27 the lesson is actions speak louder than words. Yeah, I think, Aman, that you summarize it perfectly. And I think that the two are together because 不在其位，不谋其政. Okay, meaning that if you are not officially having a specific position in a specific project, don't meddle in the affairs that are the responsibility of another one. And it's very related to 27 because 27 because in ancient China, or even in modern China, in the different governmental departments, one of the things that is that could be very problematic, that is, you would make comments that are not invited about the project of someone under the leadership of someone else. It doesn't mean that you don't have the right to think about that by yourself, or to discuss it with people, or even to discuss it with the leader of the project. But here I think that it's more a warning not to meddle in an unaware manner in a project that is not under your direct responsibility. And I would say that Zhengzi offer a close-minded interpretation of the same lines, saying that the thoughts of the Junzi do not stray beyond his position. Okay, so planning and thinking is not exactly the same. Okay, you can have an expansion of your mind, you can go deeper in your understanding of reality, but it doesn't mean that you will necessarily offer your plan when someone else is the leader of that project. Maybe you can discuss it with him, but maybe there is a right manner to discuss it with him. And I would say that that is the lesson, because for me, the two are together.
I just have a quick question. Joy,
Yeah.
which one of yours was that mentioned about control? Oh, I'm sorry, David, you have your hand up.
I just wanted to respond. Yeah, that exactly what I was asking, if the translation thinking was misleading in English, because that just means quietly in your head to yourself, as opposed to considering, then meddling, then getting involved and commenting on. That's, so translating and thinking it's good to see the dyad, the two together. And I do think that takes you from the idea of speaking about, where you're now meddling already, because you're bringing it to other people. Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks.
Joy, was 26 the one that talked about control for you?
I don't think it's control though. I think it's, yeah, it's something that you don't think beyond your position, you know, whatever your responsibility or the matter.
Okay,
That's what I think.
thank you. So shall we go for it, Ahmad?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay, so
28,
Penny, would you-
29.
Yeah, 28 and 29, and let's make Jason proud.
Anyone want to read their translation?
You want James Legge?
Please.
Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The master said, "The way of the superior man is threefold, but I am not equal to it. Virtuous, he is free from anxieties. Wise, he is free from perplexities. Bold, he is free from fear." Zukang said, "Master, that is what you yourself say." Zukang was in the habit of comparing men together. The master said, "Su must have reached a high pitch of excellence. Now I have not leisure for this."
Thank
So-
you, Penny.
okay.
So next we will go to Joy, if you will. Be so
Okay,
kind.
yes. 1428. Confucius say, 君子 say three important things, but I'm incapable to doing those. The 仁者 benevolent, do not worry. The wise, do not confuse. The brave man is not afraid. Zigong say the master has his own way. 1429. Zigong was correcting people. Confucius say, Zigong must be quite talented. I have no spare time to do this. 1430. The master say, I don't worry about being unknown. I worry about my lack of ability. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Mon.
Okay. 1428. The master said, "There are three Tao for Junzi, but I am incapable of reaching them. The Ren are not anxious, the wise are not perplexed, and the brave are not fearful." Zigong said, "This is the Tao the master prescribes for himself." 29. Zigong was correcting people. The master said, "Is Si, Zigong, a worthy man? I have no time for that." 30. The master said, "Don't worry about people not knowing you. Worry about what you are not able to do." So let me start briefly by just running through a few of Jason's notes here and giving my editorial in very terse terms. So he's making universal virtues: not anxious, not perplexed, and not fearful. So these are negatives. This is what it is not to be read. But these are the three Tao that a Junzi is to have, or the way that they are to be, that he says he is incapable of reaching. Wisdom, Ren, and bravery are called the three universals in the doctrine of the mean. Yeah, I won't go much further than that. Zigong has time to nitpick others, and Confucius says, "Wow, I just don't have time for that myself because I am not yet a worthy man, so I'm constantly working on myself. Nice to see you're not," which that isn't actually in there, but that's the sentiment, and that's kind of the lesson. If I'm not a worthy man and I'm spending all my time working on myself and I'm not nitpicking these people to death, even though much of the Analects does feel like nitpickery, what does Zigong think he's doing other than just strong-arming and bullying? Again, punching down. The master said, don't worry. I read it. Don't worry about people not knowing you. Worry about what you are not able to do. This, I think, is kind of a profound lesson. And it ties back in with that want to impress. Worry about the things that are in your power and what you can do, and do them. That is the unspoken part here. Whether or not you gain notoriety for them is secondary. I have to admit, this hits me very much in the feels, because I enjoy doing the translations with Jason. When we've completed one, I'm over the moon. I should not be concerned that it gets published or accepted by a university press or not. I should be concerned about ongoing the process. It's very hard to let go of that want to have your work recognized, have what you can do appreciated by others in some way. But the master is telling us, let go of that, stay focused on the work and do the work. If it'll speak for itself, it'll speak for itself. That's kind of the message I think that is there. As far as a unifying theme goes, I won't try for one. I'll simply say what I said is true. I enjoy very much doing this translation. I am fulfilled every time we get through one of these and have something completed, because there is something out there that I helped, bring into the world. But I am getting the whip to myself to edit and edit and edit and edit and edit so that I can submit it to a university press, because I would love to have it in that corpus. I just mentally am a natural pessimist. My mother even bought me a shirt that says pessimism never works. I tell people this all the time. It's true. So I have to psych myself up for a rejection letter, and anything else than that is a pleasant surprise. But I've given myself to the end of the month. Yeah, that's my editorial about all of this. I thank you. I got to go off camera. I'll stick around for as long as I can, but I'm excited to hear what everyone says. I have things to be doing, multitasking, but I'm still here. Thank you all.
We just want to say